start very TED-like on the birthday issue. I turned 50 3 days ago. So when I received this invitation, I thought, oh no, I would organize a party or something. And then I thought like, oh yes, it would give me a very nice opportunity to explore my own experience of what has brought me here. And that's what I'm going to invite you to do now. The main, perhaps, takeaway that you should already know if you read carefully the title, The Many Lives of One, is that any experience is never a singular experience. There's always something more. And I'll try to tell you how that has been for me. This first slide actually was the birthday gift of my brother. And it's in Santiago, in Chile. And perhaps it evokes also the slogan, "Our world is not for sale," of the 1990s, if there are people here that were demonstrations in the 1990s. The need to live without having a price is a graffiti, a street art. There is a plastic bag with rubbish in the corner, and this is going to be important at the end of the talk, because I'm going to walk you to how to think about waste and street art as cues to understand the ways in which we interact and live in society today. Now, as I said, this is in Chile. I'm originally from Chile. I was born and brought up there. And I left to Europe 25 years ago. As a young sociologist, I graduated there. I'd never planned actually to come to Europe. I started working. I wanted to change things. I graduated in '96. My country had just recently transited from a dictatorship to democracy. I was educated during the Pinochet dictatorship. So I wanted to stay there and work in the country and transform it for all these promises of democracy that we all grew up with, my generation grew up with. So when I graduated, I started working as a research assistant in projects that were mostly related to poverty alleviation or women empowerment or youth empowerment. And it was in one of these works, doing interviews in a poor neighborhood in Santiago, that actually my conceptual journey started. And I was not really aware that that would be the case. Which brings me to the question of experience. Sometimes the things that most matter to us are something that we actually cannot notice, and we only realize in retrospect. So this retrospective experience for me is the experience of being in a primary health center, talking with people that were waiting there to see the doctor. And this was a particular woman whose name I don't actually remember, but what she said to me stuck with me and has brought me actually here to be telling this story to you. When I was asking her why she was there, how frequently she was going to this place, she said, well, where would we go? There's no place for us to go. And I thought, wait a second, this is a democratic country. We are sort of building it and opening it up for many, for people. How is it possible that there are people who don't have any place to go? What happened with public spaces? Is there any relationship between public spaces, the way in which people inhabit cities, and the way in which democracy runs? And at that time I didn't have the conceptual vocabulary to explore that, and so the journey began for me. And I decided to come to Europe to study and to try to see whether there was a connection between space and democracy. Whether the way in which we organize our cities express also the way in which politically our societies are organized. and ask the question, where is democracy? Where can we experience it? That led me to the UK to do a master's, and then to Italy to do a PhD on that particular topic. It's something that actually sticks with me today when I see the demonstrations going across the world for different reasons, against the war, or for climate awareness and trying to tackle the environmental crisis. So how is it that our experience in space can translate the political challenges that we are facing? This question, tagged in the streets of Santiago during the social uprising in October 2019, has remained open and unanswered in my country, Chile, and in many others. Probably you can perhaps relate in your own countries and your own backgrounds. Now, of course, the question of democracy is not a question of about one single experience, because there is no one experience of democracy, as there are no one type of public spaces. This is on the streets, but public spaces range from shopping malls, even if they are privately owned, to museums, to supermarkets, sometimes to highways, etc. So the question of the experience of democracy is, again, a plural one. And if the experience of democracy is a plural one, then perhaps there are many ways in which we experience also what is to be a citizen, for those of us who are citizens. Now, I didn't come to citizenship in a conceptual exercise, although I could give you the whole spiel about the history of the concept, but that would be very boring, and I was advised not to do so. But the reason why I'm interested in citizenship is actually not only conceptually, but because I became aware of my own citizenship when I was abroad. So I suddenly realized I was Latin American in Europe, and that was actually sometimes good and sometimes very, very bad. It was good because I was a woman and I was not European, so I would check 2 boxes in the diversity and inclusion, whatever counting the universities would do. And it was not good because then I would be very, very enthusiastic or energetic, and I would be dismissed as too intense because I was a woman and because I was Latin American, so really not good. But what did that actually mean? What does it mean? What is the connection between your citizenship with who you really are, with who you think you belong, and how those two things that are so intimately related to your own life actually determine what rights you have? Why is it that my identity conditions the rights that I have? And so citizenship actually troubled me in terms of my own experience, but also troubled me in relationship to the countries that I studied. Now, I was also a Latin American that was studying Europeans, which Europeans tend not to like. This is a photograph that I took in Belfast when I was doing a project about walls in Europe. Now, we are used to hear about walls all over the world, but at the time that I was doing this project, 2008, 2009, and so on, there was still some reminiscence of a Europe post the fall of the Berlin Wall, a Europe that was without walls. And yet, in the northwest of Belfast, in Northern Ireland, walls had been prevalent for a long time. And if you look carefully, there are many devices in cities that function as walls to divide groups. And so they demarcate how people experience their being citizens or residents of those spaces. So I started thinking, well, what if instead of thinking about citizenship in terms of rights, do we try to push the question of rights to care? Why is it that we think of the citizen as a figure that actually is endowed with certain rights and responsibilities only to one specific group? Why can't we imagine a citizenship that moves in terms of a scales of care from our body and ourselves to the world? And that led me to a third concept that has been important for me in my own trajectory, which is the idea of care. So by now you know that I talk about my research mostly in relation to the 3 C's: cities, citizenship, and care. Care is the most recent one, and it was both, again, a conceptual and an academic question, but it was also related to my own personal experience. I started working on care about 8 years ago, at a time when I felt very vulnerable. I had been in Europe for about 15 years. I was a little bit drained, perhaps a little melancholic. I was perhaps also a little insecure about how all these things would come together in my own experience, how everything that I had been doing actually would make coherence in my own life. How could I assemble everything? And that vulnerability led me to think, I don't want to also be resilient to this. I just want to be cared in this vulnerability. And so, how is that I define what to care about? And how to care about? And who would care? And when, and so on. So the question of care became quite important for me personally, and it became also a political engagement. In Latin American scholarship, there is a very nice concept that is becoming quite important, particularly in feminist, eco-feminist circles, and is the idea of body territory. That it comes from the struggles of ecofeminists to try to reivindicate the denigration of women and of the environment and their territories. So, how we inhabit the world affects how we experience our own sense of self. And again, this brings me back to this idea of experience. The way in which we experience the world affects the way in which we think about it. Now, how we think, it's actually a matter of high political importance today. This was again a tag during the Santiago, taken from the streets in Santiago, and I think it evokes a quote that I like very much of Virginia Woolf: "Think we must." Even in times, even in times like now, where we see a lot of conflicts going around, and we all feel the drive perhaps to act, think we must, to define and understand why it matters and how it matters and how to actually care. Perhaps the first political act is to what we put attention and to what we give attention in order to act. So I've told you a little bit 3 kind of vignettes of my life that led me to the kind of academic that I am today. I define my research, like I said, and my own teaching in terms of cities, citizenship, and care. And I look at these aspects. For me, the question of space is still important. What are the spaces of care? Perhaps conversations like these ones are also spaces of care. The question of identity, it's an always open question and a tricky one to answer. And so these 3 C's actually shape very much who I am in my professional life, but also how I experience my own life, because they're part of what has brought me here. It sounds very conceptual, but it also has some very empirical angles in my own research, particularly in relation to waste and street art, like I said in one of the first slides of this presentation. And why is it that I care about waste and street art? It's because mostly people don't care about this. You know? Waste is often out of sight, out of mind, even for those of us who are more sort of environmentally inclined and we dutifully recycle and so on. But if you think about it, 1/3 of the food that is produced globally is lost or goes to waste. And yet, there are millions of people who are suffering hunger and starvation, and hunger is used as a weapon of war. And yet, we waste food in high quantities. We also know that in the Netherlands, people use, on average, about 1/3, 28% of their closets. I don't know your case. I know it applies roughly to me. And yet, all that excess clothing ends up in landfills, incinerators, or is exported to the global south, presumably for some form of economic circularity, but also affecting the cultural production of those countries, say, in terms of their own fashion industries. So the question of waste is a question of how we relate to space, how we engage as citizens within our countries and beyond, and how we care about the world. Similarly, the question of street art. For some people, street art is somehow threatened. In many countries, it's a form that is criminalized and is associated with people that behave asocially. For others, like me, who actually like street art, not in their own aesthetic expression, it's a form to understand who are making claims over the city. Who are these people that actually, even if they are illegible, are making a sign on the surfaces of the city to say, we are here. I am here and I deserve space. It's like the lady in the health center, you know? Where else would I go? So I think one can read what is going on in the cities we inhabit if you look at the different manifestations of street art in and around the city. And so I'm going to leave you with one also graffiti from, or a tag from 2019. There cannot be happiness in a world where what is undesirable is discarded. Even those experiences that seem uncomfortable, those experiences that seem a bit unsettling, eventually are going to help us and going to open for us a multiplicity of readings that we are not aware now. I didn't know that the different stories that I'm telling you now would constitute my life as it is in this moment. So I contend here that experience is always plural because they're open. Any experience is open as a form of interaction with other people. It's a form as a form of relating to one another. It's open for the way in which we interpret it for ourselves. And eventually, in time, it's going to be open to the way in which we recall it and we remember it. So experiences are always multiple, and they constitute many facets of our lives, but we live only once. So here, the story of the many lives. Oh, bye.